The Pine Bar at London's Millennium Hotel was all polished wood and hushed conversations that afternoon. Alexander Litvinenko settled into a plush armchair, facing two men he had known from his former life in Russian intelligence. One of them, Andrei Lugovoy, ordered a pot of green tea. As the porcelain cup was passed to Litvinenko, Lugovoy's hand drifted over it, his fingers releasing a few drops of a clear liquid from a vial concealed in his palm. The substance dissolved instantly into the steaming tea, leaving no trace, no scent, no warning. Litvinenko raised the white cup to his lips, the bitter warmth of the tea familiar and comforting. He took several sips, discussing old times and current politics with his companions. Across the table, the second man, Dmitri Kovtun, watched quietly. The vial was already gone, slipped back into a pocket. For the next 20 minutes, Litvinenko continued to drink, completely unaware that he had just ingested one of the rarest and most lethal poisons on Earth, a metal called polonium-210. The meeting concluded with handshakes. Litvinenko left the hotel, the poison already coursing through his digestive tract. Inside his body, the polonium atoms began their silent work, emitting intense radiation that would tear apart his cells from within. Back in the Pine Bar, a busboy cleared the table, unknowingly handling the teacup that now glowed with an invisible, deadly signature. The first piece of evidence in what would become an international nuclear manhunt. The green tea at the Millennium Hotel had barely settled in his stomach before the first spasms hit. Within hours, Alexander Litvinenko was hunched over his bathroom sink, his body convulsing with violent, uncontrollable vomiting. Waves of searing abdominal pain followed, doubling him over. His wife, Marina, found him drenched in cold sweat, his skin pale and clammy. They rushed to Barnet Hospital, where emergency physicians noted his racing heart and plummeting blood pressure, but the cause remained a complete mystery. Over the next 48 hours, the medical mystery deepened into a nightmare. Litvinenko's condition deteriorated with terrifying speed. Clumps of his hair began falling out onto the starched hospital pillow. His immune system collapsed as his bone marrow failed, leaving him defenseless against infection. Internally, an invisible war was raging. Cells in his intestines, liver and lymph nodes were being systematically shredded, their DNA shattered by a force the doctors could not yet see or name. The baffled medical team ran test after test, ruling out common toxins and bacterial infections. They transferred him to University College Hospital for more specialized care, but the puzzle only grew. His symptoms pointed to acute radiation poisoning, yet he showed none of the external burns typical of such exposure. He was dying from the inside out, poisoned by something that left no chemical signature in standard screens, a ghost in his bloodstream destroying him cell by cell. As Litvinenko's body failed in London, the story of his poison began a century earlier in a cluttered Parisian laboratory. There, in 1898, Marie and Pierre Curie worked through the night, their hands stained dark from the pitch-blende ore they were methodically crushing. The air tasted of dust and ozone, charged with an invisible energy they could not yet name. They processed tons of the raw mineral, boiling and filtering it in large ceramic basins, seeking the source of a mysterious radiation that fogged their photographic plates. After months of exhausting labor, a tiny, silvery residue remained. It glowed faintly with its own heat, a phenomenon so intense it defied all known chemistry. They had isolated a new element. With patriotic pride, Marie named it polonium, for her occupied homeland of Poland. In their notebooks, they recorded its astonishing power. A single speck could bombard the surrounding air, ionizing it and making it conduct electricity. They handled it with bare fingers, unaware that this beautiful, furious metal was seeding its own silent destruction within their cells. The element the Curies discovered was polonium-210, a silvery grey metal so rare it scarcely exists in nature. Its power came not from chemistry, but from physics. Each atom was unstable, decaying by firing out a heavy, positively charged particle called an alpha particle. These particles were too large to penetrate skin, but if ingested, they became a cellular wrecking ball. A minuscule amount, a single gram, was almost unimaginably potent. It was smaller than a grain of salt, yet it emitted so much energy that it could heat itself to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. In a dark room, that concentrated energy would make the metal itself glow with a faint, eerie light, a visible warning of the invisible violence within. That violence was absolute. If swallowed, those alpha particles would rip through the soft tissues of the gut, shredding cell membranes and DNA. The damage was catastrophic and untreatable. 1 gram contained enough particles to kill millions of cells, making it lethally efficient. It was a poison that worked not by toxicity, but by delivering a localized nuclear war inside the body. 3 weeks after Litvinenko collapsed, his condition remained a medical mystery. At University College Hospital, a specialist prepared a urine sample for routine toxicology. The clear liquid held no visible clues, but as he placed it near a standard radiation monitor, the device's needle twitched, then jerked violently across its scale. The specialist froze, his eyes fixed on the erratic display. He immediately transferred the sample to a shielded, high-sensitivity alpha radiation detector. The moment he activated the machine, it screamed, a piercing, continuous alarm that echoed through the secure laboratory. The readouts spiked off the charts, indicating a massive, concentrated emission of alpha particles. There was only one substance on Earth that could produce such an intense, pure alpha signal in a human biological sample: polonium-210. The reading was a nuclear fingerprint. In that instant, the baffling illness transformed. This was no food poisoning or common toxin. It was the signature of a radioactive element so rare its presence could only mean one thing. The confirmation of polonium in Litvinenko's body triggered an unprecedented forensic response. Scotland Yard launched Operation Wimbrel, deploying teams with sensitive Geiger counters across central London. Their first target was the Millennium Hotel. In the Pine Bar, a technician's detector clicked into a frantic, screeching whine as it passed over a white porcelain teacup, its surface still blazing with invisible alpha radiation from the poisoned drink. The radioactive trail led investigators to a sushi restaurant in Piccadilly. Here, the contamination was not confined to a single item, but smeared across tables, chairs and the floor, mapping where the assassins had sat and walked. The pattern suggested a careless handling of the polonium source, perhaps a leaking vial, leaving a ghostly imprint of their meal on every surface they touched. Finally, the sweep moved to Heathrow Airport. Scans inside 2 British Airways aircraft revealed hotspots on specific seats and in the lavatories. This data connected the dots, charting the killers' arrival into London and their departure after the deed. The polonium had painted a perfect damning map of their entire mission across the city, from the airport to the hotel to the restaurant. 3 weeks of agony culminated in a sterile room at University College Hospital. Alexander Litvinenko's organs had hemorrhaged internally, his bone marrow destroyed, his immune system vanished. The alpha particles from that single sip of tea had shredded his cells from within, leaving his body unable to produce blood or fight infection. By November 23rd, his systems were shutting down, one by one. In his final hours, a photograph captured the brutal transformation. The former officer lay gaunt against white sheets, his skin stretched taut over bone, every strand of hair gone. His eyes held a hollow awareness. This was not a natural illness, but a targeted erasure, the human form dismantled by an invisible internal fire. The image would become evidence of a new kind of murder. After his heart stopped, a team of British pathologists performed an autopsy under strict radioactive protocols. Their report was unequivocal. Death by acute radiation syndrome, caused by the ingestion of polonium-210. They formally ruled it a homicide. The science was incontrovertible. The teacup, the sushi bar, the planes, all glowed with the same nuclear signature that now extinguished a life on a hospital bed in London. The radioactive trail led British investigators directly to two Russian men. Andrei Lugovoy, a former KGB bodyguard, and Dmitry Kovtun, a businessman, had met Litvinenko at the Pine Bar. Their movements across London, traced by polonium contamination, placed them at the scene. In May of 2007, the Crown Prosecution Service announced murder charges against both men, requesting their extradition from Moscow. The Kremlin's response was swift and absolute. Russia's Prosecutor General flatly refused the extradition request, citing constitutional protections for its citizens. The refusal was a diplomatic slap, a clear statement that the men would face no trial in London. Tensions, already frayed by the investigation, began to crystallize into a formal political crisis between the two nations. In July of 2007, Britain expelled 4 Russian diplomats identified as intelligence officers. Moscow retaliated in kind, ordering 4 British envoys out of Russia. Ambassadors were summoned for frosty meetings. Cooperation on counter-terrorism and other issues ground to a halt. The Litvinenko poisoning had escalated from a criminal investigation into a deep, lasting freeze in relations between London and Moscow. For nearly a decade, the diplomatic freeze held, the case suspended in legal limbo. Then, in 2016, the British government finally convened a public inquiry. In a wood-panelled London courtroom, a judge named Sir Robert Owen settled behind his bench, preparing to deliver a verdict that would formally name names. He lifted a 300-page report, its conclusions drawn from years of testimony and the unassailable forensic map. The polonium trail, he stated, was incontrovertible. It led directly from the teacup at the Pine Bar, through the hands of the 2 assassins, and back to the highest levels of the Russian state. Sir Robert's voice was measured but definitive. He found that the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation had carried out the poisoning, and he concluded that the operation had probably been approved by its former director, the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. The diplomatic freeze that followed the inquiry settled into a new, uneasy normal. In secure facilities across the globe, the very substance that killed Litvinenko now sat under lock and key. Polonium-210, that rare and furious metal, found its primary modern purpose not in weapons, but in industry. Tiny, sealed sources were embedded in machines designed to neutralize static electricity in paper mills and photographic film plants. Each licensed source was a minuscule speck of the Curie's discovery, its alpha emissions now harnessed to ionize air. The paperwork tracking these devices was exhaustive, a bureaucratic monument to the fear the London incident had sown. Every milligram was accounted for, its journey from production to decommissioning logged in international registers, creating a ledger meant to prevent another teacup from ever glowing in the dark. That meticulous traceability was the lasting legacy. The Litvinenko case proved a nuclear isotope could be deployed as a silent, personalized weapon in the heart of a European capital. It left a permanent scar on intelligence tradecraft, demonstrating that even the most exotic poison leaves a forensic signature, a radioactive trail that whispers not just of the crime, but of the hand that ordered it.